So without further ado, I want to actually invite our panel up. We have Adam, who is head of product at Automatic Labs. We also have Jonas Landstrom from Volvo VC. He is the head of investments. We have Chuck Price. He's VP Cloud Service and Engineering at Peloton Technologies. And also Mark Nowolowski is the CTO of Streetline. So today the format is we want to explore the opportunities not just about connected cars but also the ecosystems around it. One of the reasons why we picked this vertical is because, as you have seen in CES, there's a lot of activities, a lot of excitement about autonomous vehicles and also connectivity to cars. But I think, like most connected products, there are a lot of opportunities, infrastructures, I would even say challenges around what goes around these connected products. So we put together this awesome panel to deep dive into this topic. We'll have each of them give 10 minutes, about 8 to 10 minutes presentation. And afterwards, we'll do just a quick panel, and then we'll open the floor for some Q&A. All right? So if you can give a round of applause, we will have Adam.
Hi guys. I'm gonna get a little AV setup here, but how you doing tonight? Pretty good. How many of you guys know what automatic is? Oh, good. Then, so I had assumed it would be a slightly lower ratio than that. Alfred's going to see if he can get that working. I assumed it'd be a slightly lower ratio than that, so the things I had prepared were sort of an introduction and overview. I'll spend the time, quickly through that. Oh, there we go. Yep. Oh, fancy. Okay. So for those who don't know, we make this product. You can hold it in your hand. I think I have one here. And by the way, I'm going to be raffling 3 of these at the end of the event tonight for answering the questions: what state has the most speeding? What day of the year has the most miles driven in it? And one more that I'm still thinking of, but so those 3 questions could win you an automatic tonight. So we make this device. What is it? It connects to your car. Obviously, we're at a connected car event. So there's a port underneath your dash that most people don't know about, but it's been there in every car in the US for the last 20 years. And that allows us to talk to your central computer in your car, gather all of the engine drivetrain data, as well as data from the sensors that we put in, and some of the sensors on your phone that it connects to. What do you do with all that? I'm going to skip those for a second. So, no, I'm not. I'm going to go back. Why we started this company, why we thought that the world needs something like this, is actually not so much about the product that you see today. That's a starting point, but it's about where we're headed, and that ties into where we see the connected car ecosystem going. So, facts to keep in mind. An American who owns a car spends between $8,000 and $10,000 a year maintaining, owning, operating that car. That's not buying it and selling it. That's just gas, insurance, maintenance, parking, registration tickets, and so on and so forth. $10,000, probably more towards 8 with recent gas prices. But those set of experiences right now, if you think of them, how you interface with them, they're not very digital. They're not very modern. None of those you would think of as an app. But you look at something like taxis, and 5 years ago you would not have thought of that as an app either, and yet I don't even need to say the names of the companies that have made that true. You guys all know that intrinsically. We believe all of these applications here and more are headed towards being appified, managed by companies and brands who are going to drive great modern experiences for you, make those better. And there's, unlike many things in the connected device space, the car has so many existing transactions to tie to, where we don't need to upsell you on something, we need to make something that you're already doing better. So that is why we wanted to provide connectivity into the car, and that sort of leads into what you'll hear later on. we really view our own application, the one that anybody who, I think we have some users in the room, and we have 2 team members in the room that are Matt and Lisa. You can raise your hands if you guys want to chat more. We view our own application as the first of many to come that tie in just using our device as the data pipe into your car. Many of those other applications exist already. I'll tell you about it. So for those who don't know, what do? We make that device and an app. The app does lots of things. I'm going to call out 6 feature headlines. They are the basic cluster of what we feel is necessary to give to people, to give them a richer, smarter vehicle ownership experience. It's a mouthful. A better car. So these 6 things I equate to being kind of like the early days of the internet, when the guys who provided you the connection had to tell you what to do with it, right? AOL and Prodigy had to create their whole little universe in there so that you knew why you wanted to buy a connection. These days, you don't ask Comcast or AT&T why you want internet. You just know all these wonderful things are possible. So our first foray into this was, what are the basic things that everybody should want? What is the calculator, the stock ticker, the equivalent of those things that the first apps app will put on its phone? In the car world, really simple, so powerful, never forget where you parked. You open your phone, you know exactly where your car is. We remember it every time you turn off the ignition. You don't have to pin anything. Know when your car is sick. So we're always scanning your engine for these diagnostic error codes, that orange check engine light. Whenever that comes on, we know not just that it's on, but we know what it means. There's an actual code definition. We can give you the number, we can give you the plain English. And if it is something that is not that critical, you can see that there, choose to not necessarily need to go to a mechanic, maybe fix it yourself. And we actually let you, it's not on this is an old screen, but we actually let you clear that engine light yourself from the phone. It's kind of a magical moment for people. Let's skip across that. This is something, I call it free OnStar. Our device has an accelerometer in it. We detect collisions. And if you get into a collision, we'll try to get in contact with you and find out, is everything okay? If it's not, we actually dispatch ambulance out to you and contact your loved ones. This comes with no service fee ongoing. It's just part of the deal of being an automatic user. And so we have, unfortunately, they're good vignettes for our marketing, but we wish they didn't happen. We do have some users who've tweeted out, I think automatic just saved my life. I was pinned down in the car, I couldn't reach my phone, and an ambulance just showed up. So we wish that didn't happen to him, but we're glad we were able to help. And our last thing that I'll sort of focus on is we provide what you would expect, what this crowd would expect, the Fitbit almost for your car, right? The digital log of all the trips you've taken, the metadata about them, where you've been, the gas you used, the cost of that, and so forth. And for some people who are very into quantified self-analysis, this in itself is fascinating enough. You can get this data on our web dashboard, you can export it to CSV, all those things, you do whatever you want. Where I think the power of this data comes in for the mainstream, though, is around use cases like expensing and accounting. Every Uber and Lyft driver out there can deduct 57 cents per mile against federal income tax. And if you drive for work in a meaningful way, so can you. But if you were to be audited about that claim, you need proof. And we are doing a digital log for you. There's the last thing up there, that big number in the corner. Is this a laser? There we go. That's 62. That is the representation of our drive score. Our drive score is not something for everybody, but it is a feature that a lot of our early adopters loved. It is a measure of how fuel efficient you are driving. Not what your exact MPG is, but whether or not you're taking the actions that lead to fuel economy being good generally. So we look for hard brakes, hard accelerations, going faster than you need to, things like that. And we'll score you, give you audio feedback, score feedback in numerical terms, and call out those 3 things I mentioned, brakes, accels, and speeding. We'll call those out on a trip level basis. That's if you choose to engage with that. If you want coaching and feedback, we've found that people are able to save 15, 20, sometimes even people claiming 25% of their sort of behavioral change fuel consumption. That meant a lot when fuel was $5 a gallon, maybe a little less now, but it is a great feature for people. Like I was saying though, this application that I just went through in blurry detail is the first of what we see as the ecosystem of consumer-focused vehicle applications. And we are charging down the pathway now of making available to our users lots of digital services connected up to other companies. I just want to tease with a few that exist today. So this is our dashboard. It technically is a platform app because anybody could have built this using our APIs. On the web, you can get all the same data that's on your, You can get all the same data that's on your phone and do your analysis there, export your trips and so forth. This is just bragging rights. We did a deal last year with Ford where we were given sort of special proprietary access to their Ford Sync subsystems. And that's not an app in the traditional sense, but it is a way to extend the power of what your automatic does. IFT, I know this crowd knows IFT. So IFT built us a channel a long time ago, and that really was the breeding grounds for lots and lots of applications that are now being built out. One of the earliest, before our web dashboard existed, people just wanted to get their trips out of their mobile phone, log them to a Google spreadsheet. I use this every day when I start driving, launch Waze automatically. There's ones to turn on your hue lights and text your wife or husband. Lots and lots, there's hundreds of recipes that have been made for those who know how to and want to use it. One of those was that it let people control their Nest thermostat. And that was an exciting, compelling use case to the users, also to Nest. So about 6 months ago, they reached out to us and said, we noticed a lot of traffic coming from Automatic through IFT to the Nest. We want that to be direct. So let's work together and make that possible. This past CES, we launched with them, so we built an integration over there that lets your car actually talk to your home. And the sort of coolest use case there is as you're leaving the office, it can be sort of calculating your estimated time to arrival, sending that over to the house, which then decides when to turn up the heat, or turn down the heat rather, and get your house comfortable for your arrival. Any users in San Francisco get this app now. This is Spot Angels. They have mapped all of the street parking rules in this city, only this city. If you don't have Automatic, you can still use this app and it's awesome. You open it, pin yourself to say I parked here, and they know when you're supposed to move your car. But you have to open it and you have to pin yourself, and that's lame because we're living in 2015. So you can log in with Automatic. And when you do that, we pass your location every time you park in the background. This whole UI goes away, and you just interact via push notification. Every time I park, it says, my car had, we know where you parked, you're gonna need to move by 6 a.m. on Sunday, and we'll text you again before that, before you be at risk of getting a ticket. This is an application we built in-house, so this is a platform app, but it's one of our flagships. You can't see much from this. It's called License Plus, and it's the idea of building a curriculum for teenagers who are new to driving, negotiating that complex, anxious relationship with their parents to sort of prove their skills, prove their worth. I have 1 minute. We're going to carry on. We did a thing with Java, which yells at you if you are lazy. If you want to walk more and you instead have driven short distances, we will tell you you are lazy and you should have walked, and how many steps that would have been. It's fun. And that's sort of the types of things we have going on. As you can imagine, this crowd I know likes to think about, we have a huge opportunity as well with the aggregate data set we're collecting. What you're looking at there is a map of a subsection of San Francisco, and those are all hard brake events that have happened throughout the city. Basically, if you zoom out, you can determine what are the most dangerous intersections and where are traffic patterns emerging and things like that that could really play into city planning level things, or working with guys like Streetline to help map out the parking graph, right? And to give you guys a sense of scale before I turn the mic over, these are snapshots of what a week's worth of our trips look like. This is obviously the Bay Area. These are map base layers with no roads on them, so all of the paths you're seeing are actual Automatic trips. Basically here it's about 100.00% of all roads in this area. This is Minneapolis, just as a comparison, because you'd expect the left, but often people don't expect the right. So that tiny bit there, that's the downtown metro, or the downtown city area, and this is the whole metro. Again, I don't know the exact percent, but we're over 98% of all roads in that area traced. So that's kind of what we're doing. I got through almost all of what I wanted, but in the interest of time, I'll pass the mic back.
Cool. Thank you. We're gonna hold off questions until the end. We're gonna do a panel right afterwards. So next we're gonna have Jonas Lindström, from head of investments of Global VC. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on connected cars.
Start with a cautionary tale. I got a push notification that my car had a hard braking event, so I called my wife and asked her why she had done a hard braking. That conversation did not turn out well. So how many know about Volvo? And how many have seen this movie? So Volvo Group, that I represent, sold Volvo cars in 1999 and then to Ford, who then sold it to Geely in 2010. So today we're all about commercial vehicles, and we're probably the largest truck manufacturer in the world. And with this picture, it's pretty obvious that trucks are much more awesome than cars. And this is actually one of the most, so if you haven't seen the movie, see it, but you probably have 77 million people have seen it, so it's one of the most viral ad campaigns for a B2B company ever. And the company that enabled the technology, the dynamic steering, was actually an investment from us, which we were very proud of. $40 billion company, truly global. 70% of the revenues is from trucks, 20% approximately from construction equipment, and then we are one of the largest bus manufacturers and boat engines with Volvo Penta. I represent the venture arm, so Volvo Group Venture Capital. We've been around since 1998. We've done about 60 investments in 65 companies and participated in about 250 rounds. And our current sort of tagline is steel to bits to transport miles. And it ties back into Volvo's vision, which is to become the world leader in sustainable transport solutions, which is not only about the vehicle, right? So as you heard from Adam, there's a lot of stuff happening when you move from, when you connect steel to the internet and then build services on top of that. And that's the area that I'm completely focused on, and where the last couple of years we've done all our investments in that space. And Volvo is amazing at making fantastic trucks, but struggle a bit when it comes to do services. We're about 10 people. We do 3 to 5 investments per year, so it's a small organization. Completely stage agnostic, but very focused on companies where we can provide some kind of leverage to the companies, and where long term we see that working closely with that company can provide some kind of strategic benefit back to the group. Important to say is that we completely separate the investment activities from any commercial deals, but obviously we work a lot to make that happen and sort of avoid the not invented here mentality. A few of the investments that I've made since I came here and opened our US office about 2 years ago. So all of these are sort of based on connecting things, and in this case vehicles and heavy vehicles, to the internet and then build services. So in the upper left, Cargomatic, that is sort of today actually announced their $8 million Series A, which we participated in, and they do sort of Uber for local trucking, so utilizing the mobile phone to connect trucks with spare capacity to shippers that want to ship in real time and do what you sort of expect in 2015, so shippers can see the trucks driving around, they know the route, and then enable them to get the trucks that's closest to them. And most of these trucking companies are have 1 to 10 trucks, and for them to sort of advertise their spare capacity has not been possible to date. So huge improvement in sort of transport efficiency. And utilizing the mobile phone and not have connectivity to the vehicle is sort of the first step. And you can imagine it being even more efficient when the truck will communicate exactly how many percent that is occupied and not, and so on. Decisive connects basically all the information and communication around the service event. So instead of you coming to the dealership when it's broken down and they sort of start by asking you the VIN number, etc., it knows everything about the vehicle, and you communicate on this digital platform instead of calling back and forth and faxing stuff, which is actually happening today. And then Lytics is utilizing a device with cameras and sensors to train drivers based on their own behavior. So if you're a commercial driver in a large fleet with the system, and for example, all the city buses in San Francisco have this system, and you're involved in near accidents, then you will be trained on that behavior. And they reduce the number of accidents in large fleets with between 30 and 90%. No vehicle-centric technology that can do that. So very cool use case. Then RidePal, a company here in the city that does basically Google buses for the rest of us. So a software platform that enables several corporations to share commuter shuttle. So when you think about why connectivity is so important for OEMs, it's about a couple of things. And the first one is that I think that within 5 years, when you buy a new truck, the connected services and the ecosystem of services around it will be as important as the specification of the truck. And I think we see it today on when you go in and buy a car. You don't care that most people today don't really care that much how many horsepower it has, if it's etc. I mean, it's a lot have to do with infotainment and the services around it, and that will, I think, only increase the next couple of years, also in the commercial field. And maybe even more important, I think that the connected services and the analytics that can be done by both the OEM, the dealer, and the customer will be the most important differentiator in the aftermarket. And that is really, really important because we make maybe 20 to 30% of our sales by selling aftermarket, but we make somewhere between 50 and 80% of our profits by selling things aftermarket, mainly parts, but already today, unless you use the data about the vehicle to create a great experience for the customer when they come into the dealership, you're at a disadvantage compared to other partners. And you can imagine the difference between a company that don't know anything about how this vehicle has been driven, how the vehicle has been managed during a number of years when you buy a used truck, or if you're to price a maintenance contract with a customer and you know that this customer has really careful drivers, they drive on really good roads, then you can price it one way, whereas another one that has really sloppy drivers to do a lot of hard braking, then the cost of that will be much higher. So unless you have that data and utilize that data, you will be at a significant disadvantage. And when it comes to large companies and large hardware-centric organizations, we're not awesome at making software-based services. So the same thing that makes us amazing at making really reliable trucks that just go and go and go makes us really, really bad at making sort of innovative services based on a technology stack that changes very, very fast. To make this point, I did a slide once where I compared the improvement that's been done on the truck the last 20 years, which was like an improvement of a factor 2, whereas the microprocessor, which has been improved like a factor of 10 million or something. And there's a huge difference in the type of process needed, and that's why we need to collaborate with startups and other companies that wake up every day and think about this and know these things. When we think about the value that connectivity can provide, we talk about the connected quadrants, and basically we divide the advantages between the OEM and the dealer on the right side and the consumer or the driver on the left side. And then on top, we have revenue generating services, and on the bottom we have cost saving services. And a lot of the things that are, I mean, when we started, we actually made our first investment in this space back in 1999 in a company called Wireless Car. And we have our own sort of fleet management systems that are based on the system. And we all started up in the fourth quadrant about making efficiency services for our customer. Whereas now a lot of the activities is on the right side. How can we utilize the data to make the truck better, to price service contracts, to contact the customers to come in for an oil change when they need to instead of every 10,000 miles, which is kind of ridiculous. And there's huge amount of savings that can be done for the OEM in those areas. And I think we're at really early stage of that development. And then that connectivity, so that pays for connectivity in all our vehicles. So from the factory, all vehicles are equipped with a telematic device that sends the information to the cloud. And then the goal is to enable other companies to build services on top of that, which to some extent is similar to your vision, right? Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you. Next we have Chuck. Chuck is, should I get it right? Chuck is the VP of Cloud Services and Engineering at Peloton Technologies.
Hi, thank you. Chuck Price, VP of Cloud Engineering at Peloton Technology. How many of you have heard of Peloton? Peloton Tech? How many of you have been to our website? How many of you watched the video that I'm about to show? Okay, quite simply, we're a vehicle automation company. We're in the business of connecting large trucks to allow them to platoon, which is drafting, like race cars, or if you're a cyclist, like a Peloton in racing. We do this with some technology that the video will describe, and I won't spend a lot of time talking about the automation. I'll spend most of my talk talking about the data exhaust that comes from these vehicles and how we intend to capitalize on it. So, that didn't work. Thank you. Okay, and this will be my CEO. We were recently interviewed by
Trucking is really the lifeblood of the U.S. economy. There's a great saying in the trucking industry: if you bought it, a truck brought it. Meaning, everything we use is pretty much is brought by trucks. We're developing a system to improve safety and efficiency of trucks by using advanced sensing and communications. You can think of it a little bit like cruise control in your car, in that we control the gas and the brake. But we do it for a pair of trucks using a direct communication link between those trucks. So as the driver of the rear truck, you are steering. The driver of the front truck steering as well. These are not automated trucks. We're just adding to the ability of the drivers. On the front truck, there's a radar sensor looking 800 feet down the road, sensing any obstacle. It detects that and then automatically applies the brakes in both trucks. The radar sensor can see farther than a human driver can reliably see, and it can do it every time. A human driver typically takes 1 to 2 seconds to react to whatever is in front of you. We can do it in about 1/100 of a second. Inside the truck, we try to change the driver's experience as little as possible. We add, a video display on the windshield that shows you the view from the other truck, control to engage and disengage the system. But fundamentally, you're just driving your truck. Certainly, fuel is the biggest expense for fleets. It's about 40% of the operating expense of a typical fleet. These trucks typically spend about $100,000 a year on diesel fuel per truck. The efficiency comes from the fact that we can safely put the trucks closer together than what's safe when you're manually driving, and from aerodynamics, so reducing wind resistance, we save fuel for both trucks. We've tested the system. We've driven over 10,000 miles so far in our prototype trucks in platoon formation. The first large-scale deployments will be next year in mid-2015, and that's when you'll start seeing a lot of these trucks out on the road platooning.
Okay. Now, I will say, we aren't the first ones to have attempted to do this. This is a technology that's been tried a few times. We do think that we have a little bit better approach than was attempted before. I will say as well, our CEO and our chief scientist in the company have deep experience in vehicle automation. Chris Gerdes, our chief scientist, basically invented truck platooning, vehicle platooning at Berkeley. And tested it on the highways back in the 90s, and we're bringing that technology forward. So we connect two trucks, both using the radar and using vehicle-to-vehicle technology called DSRC, which is Dedicated Short Range Communications, which is a Wi-Fi type technology for the automotive space. It's a technology that's going to be mandated probably in the next few years for all vehicles. So we'll eventually be seeing this kind of communication technology being much more ubiquitous in vehicles. We also, most importantly, for my purposes, because I own the cloud part of this, we connect vehicles to the cloud, to what we call the Network Operations Center. We monitor all vehicles using this technology all the time, in real time, or near real time, because for many reasons. One is, you can't platoon anywhere. There are only a few areas where it is really safe. That's the open highways. When I say a few areas, that's actually a lot of space. About 40,000 miles of highway system, and that's where you find most of the trucks. We geofence off the areas that are not allowed for platooning and those that are allowed for platooning. The vehicles, if they decide to platoon, require an authorization from the cloud, allowing them to do that operation. And we also connect via Wi-Fi, so we dump a ton of data from these vehicles. We implement the approval process. We also implement a technology called link finding, which you can think of as Uber for trucks. So if you're driving down an open highway in your big truck, who are you going to platoon with? I mean, you may see some other trucks, but how do you know they're available for platooning? So the cloud informs the trucks when other trucks are near and helps them vector into to form a platoon. We get tons of data from these vehicles. Wow, I'm kind of out of order on these slides, but this is the U.S. freight system. This is about 40,000 miles. The red lines are interstates, and as you can see, almost all of long trucking happens on the interstate highways. So it's a great opportunity to link trucks together. In fact, if you look at the largest fleets, UPS, for example, has about 20,000 trucks alone. FedEx has another 24,000. Walmart has 7,000 trucks that are just roaming these highways. So just having UPS means you'll have a truck every 2 miles on these systems, effectively. So what does it mean to have a connected truck? And what are we actually doing? So we see the truck as a sensor platform for one sort of Internet of Things. We start with radar. We have radar forward-looking. We may also have blind spot radar. That's something that we're discussing. We also have video, and we fuse the video with the radar so we can do classification of objects that the radar is seeing. It turns out to be a very effective way to avoid the expense of LiDAR. So we do not have LiDAR on these vehicles. It's way too expensive. There are many, many sensors on these kinds of large trucks. Most trucks have ambient temperature sensors, barometric pressure sensors. They do that because they're trying to achieve maximum engine efficiency, so they're adjusting the engines as it rolls based on the weather around it. We add GPS, 3 space accelerometers. We can detect the tire rotation very precisely. We're talking with the stability control systems on the trucks, and we're communicating with the brake system. We affect the brake and the throttle when the vehicle's in the platoon. That's already a lot of data, and of course we're talking over DSRC. In addition, we get all engine alerts. We see the torque. We see the steering angle constantly from the vehicle. We know the fuel burn. We see the temperatures in the engines, tire pressures. We know if the seat belt's been connected. We know if the windshield wipers have been turned on. And we can have various ways of understanding what the driver himself is doing. There are literally thousands of messages that we're collecting, and we're collecting all of them. And we are normally monitoring this vehicle at the rate of about a ping a second. So there's a ton of data coming at us from these vehicles, from all vehicles in the system. So what does that data footprint look like? Each large truck is generating about 100 megabytes an hour. And for the typical truck, runs about 10 hours a day. It's about a gigabyte a day. Some trucks are doing double that. They have drivers running in teams, and so they run in shifts. But typically, we're seeing on average about a gigabyte a day. Typical large fleet has 7,000 or more trucks. The largest fleets are in the 20,000 truck range. It's a huge number of trucks. So we're expecting, with our cloud capability, to handle data in the tens or more of petabytes annually. So there are a lot of opportunities when you have this kind of data. We can provide better traffic data than any other traffic monitoring system can, because our radar tracks 64 targets simultaneously. We can see all the traffic across the lanes, so we can provide lane level traffic movement indicators. We can detect how many lanes are on a road as we're driving down the road, because we can start accumulating this data from the various trucks. We have better weather data because we're rolling these weather sensors down the highways, and they're there all the time. We can do better driver evaluation because we can see how the driver is operating in the context of the environment around him. We can do route optimization for the fleets because we can see what's happening in the various lanes of traffic. We can see when routes are being blocked. Most of these trucks run the same route every day. So as soon as a truck gets on the highway, we can predict where the truck is going to be. We can look at hazards, and we can tell them whether they should consider taking a different route based on what we already know about these vehicles. We can do better risk evaluation based on hard braking events, based on hazards that we're seeing on the highway, based on the kinds of traffic that we're seeing, and the kinds of accidents that are happening on the roadways. The insurance companies love this concept. You can't even read that, I bet. Okay, what it's telling you about, what I'm trying to tell you about here, is what I call a learning vehicle. We're implementing something we call data adaptive cruise control. One of the things that has been done in the past is terrain adaptive cruise control. You put a map in the vehicle, and when the vehicle sees that it's approaching a hill, it changes its speed to anticipate. That's a really cool technology. We can go much farther than that. by observing how other drivers are driving the route, we can find the best way to drive in hilly conditions for saving fuel and effectively moving through this. And by aggregating this data together, we can advise the vehicle or the driver of the vehicle when to shift, when to accelerate, when to decelerate. We can also do this for other controls in the vehicle. So there's a lot that we can do. And I'm running out of time, so I can't get into everything, but there's a ton that we can do here. We are connecting the road network. We are not just connecting vehicles, we're connecting the entire road network. We're collecting traffic information, weather information, changes to the road network itself as it's being repaired, rerouted, flooded out, whatever. We detect hazards and report them to all the vehicles. We provide information to the regulatory and oversight agencies so that they can build better roads. So we like to say that in the Internet of Things, we're connecting some of the largest things to the Internet. In fact, I claim we're connecting the largest thing to the Internet. We're connecting the U.S. road transportation network to the Internet through the vehicles that we're communicating with. So that's what Peloton is about. Thank you very much.
Last, we have Mark. Mark is the CTO of Streetline.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm CTO and co-founder of Streetline. We're a company that's out to solve parking problems all around the world. Did any of you park when you came here? Did you enjoy that experience? No, nobody ever says yes for some reason. So I'm going to talk about the impact of connected cars, devices, and parking. I'm going to talk a little bit about how parking and vehicles have been getting smarter over time. Or in some cases, not so much. Auto safety obviously increasing dramatically over time. Seatbelts, I remember back when at some point people didn't wear seatbelts, now they do. Navigation obviously much improved over the status quo prior to this. And of course, lots of real-time traffic. Not so much in parking. Not so much. I mean, it pretty much looks the same as it did in 1935. That's like, what, 50-some years or whatever? That's a long time to basically look the same except for the car. It's kind of a shame. It turns out that if you walk around the city here and you stop ramming cars, safely of course, and you say, hey, what are you doing right now? 30% of those people are saying, well, not much, I'm actually looking for a spot. Now if you think about that, that's extremely bad for traffic. Terrible effect. A number of studies have been done. One of our favorites is this one, but they all basically say the same thing. Horrible waste of time, horrible pollution, etc., etc. 6 out of 10 drivers, and again, similar study, 6 out of 10 drivers just don't even bother going. They're just like, you know what, I'm going to go home. I'm not going to that restaurant, I've had it. This happens. Number one complaint of merchants. So if you're a restaurant owner, what do you complain about to the city? Parking. The flip side of that is, in all fairness, many of your employees are parking in front of your restaurant, so I've got to be honest there. It turns out that building a parking space costs you $30,000. So if you go out and build a parking garage, each one of those spaces costs you $30,000. That is a lot of money. And yet, from the point of view of the motorist journey, right? If you're coming in here, you look for parking, you're coming here, right? Pretty good. But the reality of the world is that's not how it works, right? You're actually going to some place first, and then you're coming here. But your navigation system is telling you how to come here. It's not telling you how long it's going to take you to park. So we're fundamentally trying to solve that problem. And Streetline, most of our business today has to do with municipalities. It's all the municipalities. We allow them to manage parking more efficiently. Most of our applications and services today are to municipalities. We also have a free app called Parker. You can download it. It helps you find parking in cities where we have sensors. Fundamentally, we have a number of products. Parkside is web analytics. Think of it as, if in a municipality, you're fundamentally renting hotel spaces for cars. Essentially, you're renting space for cars. That's what you do. It gives you insight into how those spaces are being used. And if you're a hotel operator, you take that for granted. If you run parking in a city, you do not have that today. Park Edge similarly allows you to manage off-street facilities. It allows you to list them in a public repository, if you will, say how many spaces you have, how much they cost, et cetera, et cetera. It also allows you to connect real-time gate counting equipment, if you have that equipment, over a set of APIs, so that you can publish how many spaces you have available. If you don't have gate counting equipment, that's okay. You can tell your guys out there to go out and look and publish over the same set of APIs an estimate of the amount of parking that is available. And that, of course, all becomes available in Parker and Parker Map, which is a suite of apps, which will show consumers where to find parking. And last but not least, we also have a suite of APIs that we exchange with a number of partners. There's inbound and outbound APIs. Specifically for guide enforcement, we also have a set of APIs that we've integrated with a number of the meter companies that provide us with real-time payment information. And so if you take payment information, you combine it with policy. In other words, should the person be paying, as well as occupancy, you can more efficiently, write those tickets. But the fundamental fact is, part of what makes the parking experience work well is that people comply with the policies. The policies are there to make sure that parking is available. And no city likes giving tickets. I've talked to a lot of them. They don't like giving tickets, but it isn't necessary either. So that's all interesting. The question is, what are we doing to think beyond sensors? It is horrifically expensive to try to put sensors in each and every city in the world. They're not very expensive, and obviously there's value, but it is still fundamentally a fairly expensive process. So we've gone and engaged with a number of partners and had discussions about what we call the hybrid model. And the vision of the hybrid model is that as the amount of data points in the world increases from folks such as Automatic, for example, from folks such as, Automatic's competitors, from folks such as carriers, auto OEMs, a lot of autos are becoming more and more connected, of course, navigation companies, and as well, of course, parking payment companies. If you take that collection of data in conjunction with the sensor data that you have and the experience that you have based on the sensor data, that gives you the real-time, exactly what's going on information, what you can then build is an inference platform that allows you to share that data back. Now, the interesting thing about this is each individual party that participates in this does not have enough data on their own to solve parking problem. Automatic has good coverage, obviously, but they don't have enough information about the cars that are coming and going into a certain block, which is really what you need. You need enough coverage. But if you combine all of that data, at that point you actually have enough coverage to make a real meaningful impact in the world and help you find parking. So here's kind of how it looks. It's a very simplified diagram, apologies. But infrastructure, again, you can't deploy it everywhere. It's expensive. You can have it in some number of cities, and you definitely provide value. There's no question that the people in those randomly chosen cities, by the way, but in those cities have value both in guidance as well as in municipalities and so forth. So if you're lucky enough to be in one of those, great. Your parking problems are solved. Now, if, for example, one party participates in the platform play here, what's going to happen is you expand that coverage a little bit, and in those cities you still have great experience because you got the full coverage from the sensors, and in other areas you have reduced coverage. You've got a little bit of value in terms of parking. Maybe we've been able to infer typical policies in place. Maybe we've been able to infer roughly your probabilities of finding a space. But as you increase the number of participants in this, and as more and more cars become connected, more and more people start using their phones to find parking and provide information into the collective pool, it makes it easier for everybody else to find parking. So in the end, everybody contributes a little bit, and in exchange, everybody shares part of the pie. So that's it.
Wow, thank you for really insightful both introductions and about the product and also perspective on the state of connected cars and all the ecosystem that goes around it. So I have a few questions that I have, and then I'll open the floor to the audience. So first things, we've started to see more and more connectivity coming to cars. It started off a few years ago as infotainment, as you all know, like songs and all the navigations. And now we are starting to move towards assisted or autonomous driving. So from each of the speakers, from your personal perspective, where do you think the industry is heading in 2015? Maybe we start with Jonas.
2015. I think it's really interesting to see sort of both OEMs coming out with connectivity from the factory, and then Automatic and the other companies that are connecting it. And the connectivity is just the start. I mean, the connectivity without services is not valuable at all. So I think we'll see a lot of interesting applications and start to find those the really good use cases that makes it from nice to have to need to have, and I hope we'll see that. In Swedish, definitely turning on the heater before we get out to the car, but that's not needed here. So.
Being a Canadian, I can definitely relate to that use case.
So 2015 is, I don't think is going to be the year of the autonomous driving car. That it's fantastic to see the demos and the prototypes, and you probably within this year, if you have enough connections in the Bay Area, could sit in one on a test track. But I think it's still years and years away from being the mainstream, the Uber vision of replacing all of their drivers. What you will see, I'm sitting here representing the most consumer-focused part of this panel, and I'll be the first to admit, I think most of the innovation in connected car actually happens on the enterprise side, in trucking and in municipal level data collection. That's where you're able to really tie it to dollar ROI right now, where people are happy to make long-term investments that are going to pay off over 10 years or something like that. And the consumer end, we're trying to lead the charge on that for sure, but we're in very much the early innings. Like I said, I think the Prodigy AOL days. So you're going to see a few more cool features come out on the consumer end. You're going to see a few more applications get connected up, and it'll really be about providing excellent niche solutions to niche problems, rather than everybody, demanding that their cars talk to the internet immediately. Give us a few more years.
I would agree with a lot of what you said. I think 2015 is a year of enablement. I think we're going to see lots of activity in making the connection to many types of vehicles, and then a lot of exploitation of that over the next few years. I also agree on the consumer versus the business side. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit on the trucking side of this for a variety of reasons. One, the concentration of wealth is much easier to tap into. There are many fewer deep pocket fleets than there are individual consumers, so it's sort of easier to target to sell. But in addition, on the technology side, it's much easier to connect a truck than it is to connect a car, because large trucks are built around an open standard called J1939 for the data ports, whereas the cars are essentially a proprietary standard. You got to do a lot of work to get the data out. I'm sure Automatic did a lot of reverse engineering to achieve what they've achieved, which is really great. So it was an easier job for us to get onto the bus and to start manipulating the vehicle and to get the data out. But in any case, it's easier in trucking for a variety of reasons. There are some really strong opportunities in that area. But I think in all the areas, it's a year of enablement. You know, get the connections in and then exploit.
Yeah, I agree with most of what was said. I think there's two things that have been talked about. One is the consumer side of things, and one is the enterprise or trucking kind of aspect of things. And I think we'll continue to see quiet innovation in the trucking area. That's not something that usually makes the headlines, sorry. On the consumer front, I'm hopeful that 2015 will be the year where the in-car display is figured out, and it's kind of a uniform, pleasant experience. You know, I'm sure some of you have cars where that is not an entirely satisfactory experience, and you know, Tesla's done some great work to make people see the light on that, and I'm hopeful that that's going to continue this year.
Cool. Second question is around, what's the best way to put it? Most of connected things rely on third parties, rely on some kind of infrastructure, at the very least, for a lot of consumer products. I think even some of the trucking products, you rely on having a cell network, for example. Kind of using that as an example and looking at some of the companies, looking at some of the solutions, some of the ideas that you're thinking about, is there any areas that is kind of at the fringe of what your company will need, but you may not want to directly address that area? You wish there is innovations or there's another company working on it that will really solve my problem?
I'll take this. So our current product is Bluetooth, piggybacks on the data connection of your smartphone. That actually looks like it's purely to just save you the cost and the hassle of having to connect directly to the cell network. The truth is we get some benefits out of Bluetooth. And even if we had a cell chip, we'd still want Bluetooth connectivity. You get a few things, I won't go into details here, but happy to chat offline. But it would be sort of, you know, more magical if we could offer the same sort of value proposition to consumers, add in always-on connectivity, but not add in the cost of always-on connectivity. So right now, you know, putting a 3G, not even 4G, 3G chip into a device is somewhere around the zone of $30 of cost, actual just licensing and royalties, and not to mention the testing and extra certifications you need to go through. And then somebody's got to pay for that service, right? Cell providers are excited about this prospect of billions of new devices coming online, but when you look at what something like, you know, a fitness tracker or an automatic or so forth needs in terms of data, it's a really low data rate and a very small amount of total. That might change if we're like trying to pass high-def video, but for now, you know, it's 10 megabytes a month. And so when you start talking to Verizon and AT&T and Telefonica and those kind of companies about getting on their network, the pricing that they're able to get comfortable with just does not line up with providing a consumer product unless you're going to charge a subscription fee, and we thought that that's just not acceptable. Some of our competitors do. You buy the device, it kind of looks like ours, and then it's $100 a year. So where I want to see a lot of innovation is around providing basically a network, a cell network in effect, call it whatever you want, a long-range network for IoT devices. And there are companies working on that. You know, one of the more exciting ones is called Sigfox. There we go, we got some nods from the Europeans. So Sigfox is all over Europe, and they're just starting to roll out in the US. This is the first city. It's a technology we couldn't adopt ourselves right now because our primary market is the US, and it's, you know, if you can only cover 1 or 2, or even if it was only 25 cities, that's still not enough, but once it's nationwide, you could look at it seriously. And their deal is basically 100 bytes per second max data rate. Really slow, way more than enough for us. They're able to do at low power and at sub $1 per device per month, or, you know, depending on how much data you're consuming, could be 10 cents per device per month. that starts to get into the territory where you can enable lots more applications because you're now in the right price area.
I'd like to take this too. We have a different model and view of this because our data rates are so much higher. So we're doing a gig per day per truck, which is a lot of data. The cell phone network is a serious bottleneck for us. So we do a couple of things. One is simple. We also put Wi-Fi in the vehicle. So when the vehicles pull into their depots or their fueling stops, they dump data as fast as they can. But we're doing something that's even better, and we're doing this work. We're not going to depend on a third party unless somebody does do it. We'll be happy to leverage it. The DSRC radios, which are a Wi-Fi type radio, have a range on our trucks with our antennas of at least a mile. By the time we get 20 or 30,000 trucks on the vehicles, we're going to have trucks that are able to see each other all the time. So we're building mesh networks to allow vehicles to pass data. We know where the vehicles are going. We can do routing in advance, so we can tell the vehicle, hey, you're going to pass, a FedEx truck in 5 minutes. Push some data over to it because he's going to be in a depot in 15 minutes. So we know all that. We know all that information, and we're going to use that to move very large volumes of data for free.
Yeah, I wanted to get a very similar angle. I echo my colleagues' sentiments, particularly about the need for low bandwidth, low cost. One of the concerns for us, because we're typically deployed in a municipal area, is there's often no access to power. So really what we're after is ubiquitous networking, admittedly low bandwidth, but that can be supported on battery power. And cell phone carriers today are not at a power budget that works. Players like Sigfox and Semtech and so forth do appear to have an edge, but they're not ubiquitously deployed yet. So hopefully there'll be innovation in that area.
So I'm hearing data transmission and also power. Do you want to say anything to that?
No.
So after seeing all 4 of the presentations, I think one theme keeps coming up, and I think the way I would summarize it is all of the solutions, all of the perspective from all of our speakers, it's all around how data can provide real-time value. In the past, like some of the data, like in the ODD port and in the trucks, of course, the data has already been always been there, but they provide value at a certain point when you go to service your truck or when you go to service your car. Then data provides value. But now with connectivity, we can pull data in real time, provide real-time feedback, we provide like logistics and also allow trucks to kind of like swarm together, like do this platooning. So one question that I have is, going back to actually Adam brought up earlier and kind of triggered a tangential thought. When you said this is kind of like CompuServe back in the days. So my question is, now that we are thinking so much about extracting value out of data, is a open data approach, like approaching data that I collect with the purpose of opening up for other developers or the municipality to use the data to benefit from it, a better approach, or do you think having a closed approach to data because this is kind of proprietary, this is a value within the company? Which approach do you think, from your perspective, works better than one?
It depends if you want to be Nokia or Apple.
Okay.
So I think opening up and creating an ecosystem, especially for OEMs, will be absolutely critical. So we're starting to do some experimentation in the US with that, and there is a lot of fear of letting any data out of the door. But I think once you start doing that and leverage other service providers that can, and where your vehicle can fit into the ecosystem of the customer that always have a number of different brands, then you'll definitely be ahead. So I think that's absolutely the right route. And then you may not share 100% of the data, so you want to control it, and some things you build proprietary applications, like things that are very, very core to us, like things that help us sell spare parts.
Right.
But in general, absolutely.
So in many ways, data has become a product that we need to manage.
Absolutely, and we actually, one business model is basically selling the data per truck per month.
You want to start? So we've already cast our point of view on this as a company, and we have open-ish data. It's a gray zone where we say a user's data belongs to them, right? So application developers are able to build things off of our APIs. It's up to a user to grant them the rights to use that data. It's up to us to whitelist that application. Now, there's not really anything that we would not whitelist explicitly, unless maybe one of our competitor devices wanted to just skip the whole data infrastructure part. But open gets messy real fast, and if he's calling the Apple Nokia dichotomy, I'd call the Apple Android dichotomy out and say, there's value to being open-ish rather than fully open for the sake of, I'm going to go use the term again, casting a point of view on what you think the world should look like. And what we are trying to do is ensure the best end user experiences come to the front and are successful. So we want to not just say, there's the data, play with it, go nuts. We want to say, there's the data, experiment with it, go nuts at small scales. And when you would like to actually reach large customers, let's figure out how to do that and deliver it best to them together. Part of that is because there's business goals in mind, but part of it is because a lot of this data is pretty sensitive, and we need to, in effect, protect users. Like, you can be fairly shady. We have all of the path data of everywhere that every one of our users has ever driven. It sounds scary. Apple and Google know way more about you, probably Uber at this point, but it's data that you can't just set totally free, but we do want it free enough that people can experiment and play, and at an individual level, what you can, if you are a weekend hacker and you want to do anything with stuff that we collect, of course.
So we have an interesting sort of variation on the problem because we serve fleets. We are an independent holder of very proprietary fleet data. We know all about their routes, we know about their drivers, we know a ton of stuff. We do provide, or we will provide, an application ecosystem for third parties to leverage data. But the tension is, how do we leverage data that's very proprietary to the fleets? So what we do is we allow the fleets to opt in to aggregated, anonymized data sets. So if a fleet wants to know how they compare their drivers to compare to other drivers in the fleets based on certain data points, we require that they contribute their own data to that. We anonymize it so that the result that they get back does not indicate which fleet it was that they were working with, but they can understand sort of, for example, how a particular driver does on a particular route in a particular segment based on other drivers who have hit that segment. So we don't show them the whole route, we show them that segment as an example. But we will make this data available to other applications. We don't expect to be able to serve every market that this data can serve. We have insurance companies who are very interested. We have regulatory agencies. We have the traffic, reporting services that are begging us for lane level data, and the weather services who are begging us for the weather probe data. So I think there are great opportunities for doing this. It's sort of an Apple model in that we will vet the applications that come into the environment because it's a fairly sensitive environment. But we expect application developers to make money on serving the data. We will make a little money on providing you the raw data streams.
Yeah, we're obviously we're trying to solve the parking problem for you, the people. As such, the data is intended to be open. We don't have some of the privacy challenges that have been cited earlier, right? Because
we don't actually identify any vehicles at any point in time. So we're purely helping you find parking. So open data, yeah, absolutely for us.
So I want to open the floor to the audience. I think we have time for about 3 to 4 questions. I think the gentleman at the very back, I'll give you the mic.
What about data integrity and security, particularly, let's address the question to the guy from Automatic.
Yep.
I sell my car to somebody else. All my private driving data is mine, but I want to give it to somebody else because and they want to see have I been thrashing the car, harsh braking.
Right.
Same, I guess, in the commercial vehicle area as well. It's a resale market. How do you deal with that secondary data market? Who owns that data? How do you broker it?
So
The security angle. Can someone hack my car with your OBD device?
So, sure. There are OBD devices which are hackable, and I won't say, never, may not be the world's foremost security expert, but we've taken every sort of cutting edge, industry standard of data encryption end-to-end to keep your data safe. I won't throw others under the bus by name, but if you sort of Google some people in our space, there's very public defamation of somebody making a similar device, which basically do no encryption whatsoever. And that was an attack, sort of a white hat attack carried out by the security firm Argus. We met the CEO of Argus at CES and said, did you try to hack ours first? And he sort of shrugged, I can't say. But we had enough in place that there's a deterrent to keep that there. Sort of separate question, who owns the data, what could you do with it, how could you give it to somebody that you wanted to? Very simply, you own your data in a sense, we do as well, but you own your data and it's portable, you have the right to take it with you and show it to whomever you please. So very specifically, you would sign into our web dashboard as an automatic user and select all trips since whatever date range you want and export them to a CSV. That would have all of the drive events in it, and you could show how much you've driven, where if you wanted to, how good you were on fuel economy throughout that time. And that lends itself to future products we could make, have not yet, but could make around. Basically, it's time to sell my car. Just press the button, give me the report, as verified by Automatic. A related notion of sharing your data comes around our License Plus product that I mentioned, which is the teenage and parent curriculum for new drivers. Actually, what we found is we intended that for teens, but other use cases we hadn't imagined or hadn't thought would be real latch onto that have. So there's some specialty Ubers, I'd call them, clones of ride sharing that are serving niche functions, especially around transporting kids, where they want to certify the drivers. They want to show that they're externally validated as safe, in addition to sort of like criminal background checks and such. So we've had some people go through our License Plus as professional drivers for ride sharing programs so that they could then brag, I've got a gold medal license from Automatic on this. And that whole use case is already prepared to share out. With third-party applications, it's you authorize. Just this, we use OAuth, work exactly the way like Facebook authorizations work. So if you want to talk to a third-party app, you sign in with Automatic, and you get that screen that says this app is going to get the following 5 things. Are you okay with that? And only when you press yes do we actually start opening that up.
Next question. Actually, the lady in the back.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness that everybody has brought to the topics. I'm Michelle Avery with Aris Communications. We have a wireless network also for cars, as well as telematics services, platform, and applications. We can talk about that afterwards if you're interested.
Yes.
But I did have a question for you. I've been doing telematics for 16 years, not only with an OEM, not only with a Tier 1, but also with Aris. And one of the things that has always confused me is the OBD2 port. And I know your product is not compatible with all the cars out there that have it, but what percentage of them do you actually cover? And what is the difficulty in getting baseline functionality? I understand with the trucking about how you guys have it a lot easier with the standardization. But I'm more curious about the OBD2. What
Sure.
is so hard about that?
There's a standard, it's not well adhered to. That's in short. It's sometimes sort of just out of laziness or the electrical signals coming in and out are noisy, they're a little lossy. It's not really what you expect from modern tech. It's a 20-year-old technology. There's that aspect which is hard. Some is sort of intentional disobeying of the standard. Ferrari in particular does not follow the same pin order as others on purpose because they only want Ferrari authorized mechanics to be able to work with Ferraris. I think at this point we do support them, but not a ton of those on the network. So there's basically getting data out. Sometimes there's basic connection level challenges like that, but then there's also the issue of the data being sort of sane, right? A lot of it comes out lossy, as a word I use, comes out with it's an analog electrical signal, and that ends up having to be interpreted. There's the OBD set of data, which is supposed to be publicly available on all of these cars. There's also proprietary data, as you know, I'm sort of saying for the rest of the crowd, that if you, that port can tell you if the left turn signal is on, but that's not part of the standard common spec. If you want that, you need to go OEM by OEM, and it's actually deeper than that. It's basically ECU platform by ECU platform, so Toyota may have 16 different ones over the last 10 years. And you need to either cut a deal with them that gives you, where they give you the spec of, you just see pin 3 and 5 do a little pattern, and that's supposed to mean something. And it's only documented with Toyota or people who have reverse engineered it. The reverse engineers are not, they're not certain. They've sort of backed into it, and they're pretty confident that that's what it means. But to get it right, to understand that that is truly what's going on, to sanitize your data and make sure that what you're doing is what you think it means, that's where some of the challenge comes up.
But what percentage of cars do you think your device covers?
So it depends what covers means. Works with at all, and can capture any aspect of data, close to 100% of US gasoline cars since '96. There's a lot of caveats in that, right? Gasoline hybrids, for the most part, do work. Plug-in hybrids do not. Diesel cars do not. We have some issues with manual transmission. There's a bunch of things. But I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but something approaching 98, 99, in that zone. We have a car picker on our site I could show you and you could check.
Oh, I know, my diesel doesn't work, I was devastated.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe coming soon, maybe. So quite a large percent of them. Where we'll not cover is extremely old and extremely uncommon models. Often when we say unsupported though, that just means it hasn't been tested and verified. Sometimes there are known issues, other times there are simply a lack of confidence.
The gentleman.
So the products we're talking about, trucks and municipalities specifically, have a much longer life cycle than some of the sensors and widgets we've been putting in our lives lately. How are you guys addressing the fact that a truck may be on the road for 10 years and a parking meter may be 25 or more, and the sensors, how do you build them to be durable enough to last that kind of time, but also forward-thinking enough to address the next 5 years of technology?
Yeah, so sort of the truck industry is interesting. The large trucks, they turn over quite rapidly, actually. Typical large fleet will hold on to a truck for 4 years and then sell it to a secondary market. Some of the fleets that are large enough will use them in one domain of their system and then retire them off of, for example, long haul, and then move them into local motion. The systems that we're building to hardened automotive standards. So these are designed to be able to bake in cabins and deal with the extremes. So the wiring systems in these vehicles and the connector systems are designed for being bounced around and being pushed around when things are being maintained. So there's a lot of work in the automotive industry to make, especially things like connectors, be robust. And consumer level products, they just don't cut it. We don't even start there. Well, okay, our prototype has a few, but it's a prototype. But the production system is built to automotive standards. In fact, our director of vehicle engineering is directly from Detroit, and that's what we built to.
I would say generally we don't. So if you go into a truck that's a number of years old, the electronics looks like ridiculously old. We haven't addressed it in a good way. And the way that it's been addressed today is that you put in a third-party supplier screen, and then you change that every 2, 3, 4 years because technology turns so much faster. And the problem is even bigger. I mean, even our development cycles are so long. So when we bring like 3G to the market, that's when 4G is coming. So it's a huge challenge, and there are a lot of work to do it to sort of separate out the things that develops much faster to be able to change them when you do service, for example. But so far, we haven't.
On the sensors, one of the reasons I commented on power is because it's really important for us. When we put a sensor in the ground, we expect it to last 5 years, and typically it does. It's fully epoxy encased. It's flush mounted with the pavement. You don't even notice it unless you know you should be looking, and it's pretty close to indestructible. And they do actually last that long, and we actually have a model coming out this year that lasts about twice as long. So that's how we address that issue.
One more thing that most of our system is most of the tech is software, so we have automatic upgrade, we have remote upgrade.
Yeah, you can't do anything without that. Sorry.
One last question, then we'll have 2 announcements, then we'll open the floor and you can come approach and talk to the speaker directly.
Raffle.
Say again?
Raffle.
Raffle, and raffles as well. Gentleman with the blue shirt.
Gentlemen, Randall Jacobs of Open Bike. We're building an onboard computer for bicycles, essentially OBD2 for bicycles. Fear of collisions with cars is one of the main things keeping people from riding more often. I know that Volvo is collaborating with POC helmets on vehicle-to-vehicle communication to prevent collisions. So what other technologies can the bicycle industry be focusing on to improve rider safety and thus the appeal of bicycles?
I think the standards that are coming out using DSRC, I assume you're using DSRC as the radio emission. That is going to be mandated for all vehicles probably within the next 5 years. So first, conform those standards. But also don't assume that the cars around you actually are equipped, because it's going to take a long time for that to happen.
I don't have a comment so much on technologies for that, but rather remembering a book I read. If you're interested in the deeper topics of this industry, I recommend reading Traffic by Tom Vanderbilt. It's this like 400-page tome of all the academic research that's been done to date about what influences traffic patterns, mostly focused on cars, but he has a lot of sections in there about bicycles. And basically noted that there's a really strong correlation with the more bikes there are per capita, the fewer accidents there are per capita. And it's really just so the Netherlands has both the most number of bikes per capita and the sort of safest biking environments. And they just called out that, there's some threshold where drivers of cars become more aware that they need to be looking out for this. They're not taking sharp corners because they are used to bikers being there. I think that might be the most efficient way to get society safer for bikes. And then there's a whole ton of details on how you can build roads that are more effective. A thing I remember now from there that was fascinating to me is actually biker safety goes up if you get rid of bike lanes, because if they are considered full-fledged members of traffic flow, they're more in your direct view. You're not, you don't have a car trying to swipe into the bike lane. They're just, everybody's in the lane. So that's 2 cents.
Awesome. We're gonna do announcements. I think
One last.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not a comment to this. I would like to add an announcement to this, or just a closing statement, if you will. We are probably one of the, if not the only, mostly software startup in the world that has 2 large trucks sitting in our engineering workspace with us. What you saw in the video was our original seed space with the trucks and the desks. We moved to a larger space with the trucks and a lot of desks. And we're doing a lot of tech, and we're hiring.
We're hiring.
We're not hiring.
We're hiring.
Developing the job in connected vehicles. These are